Good evening, this is Goldie, also known as Mr. Anecdotal, Mr. Pasty, and the Talking Head. It's Wednesday, August 10th, 2011. Remember, most importantly, I rant so you don't have to. If I don't have your email and you'd like to receive the script of each show, send your email to my new email address, which is goldierant@gmail.com. I'm realizing that while I watch Fox so you don't have to, and after witnessing Casey Anthony Goes to Washington, which was the debt ceiling debacle, nothing that you hear between now and the election has anything to do with the subject that they are talking about. What they will all be talking about is the election only, solamente. So I'll be watching less Fox and listening to less Rush. All they're trying to do is get their candidates elected. Here's a brief summary of what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk a little bit about water. I'm going to talk about incorrect theories by one of my rantees. I'm going to talk about how Rick Perry is the opposite of what the Tea Party wants, the theoretical Tea Party, not FreedomWorks. He does what FreedomWorks wants. And how he panders to corporate donors and his corporate welfare, including the tollway debacles. I'm going to talk about the EPA and what it would look like under Perry, and how he is not a libertarian. I realized that the bulk of my rant last week was a response to an email from a misguided friend regarding my letter to the editor about water and deed restrictions in Texas that require water to be used on landscaping. Since his email really did not complain about the letter to the editor correctly, I went off on the general subject of water. However, let me get back to the heart of the letter to the editor. I was complaining that in Texas, there are large subdivisions, mainly outside of incorporated areas, that require a certain type of invasive lawn, bushes, and trees, all of which must remain alive or be replaced when deceased. Approximately 60% of water is used for this purpose versus flushing toilets, washing clothes and dishes, and showering. Large capital expenditures have had to be made at taxpayer expense to increase water capacity. My solution would limit the impact of outside mandatory landscaping in deed restrictions. My friend Scooter caught the rant and replied in an email. Hey Goldie, your buddy had it backwards. Your proposed legislation reduces the burden of government regulation on our freedoms. The key here is to think of homeowners associations as government that is inadequately limited in its powers, requiring a superordinate governing body to establish limits, much the way our federal Constitution limits both federal and state and local powers. These landscaping policies cost the larger community. They are intended to support home prices on the theory that home buyers want green lawns. Maybe so, but maybe a xeriscape lawn would be more appealing. How would we know? There aren't any. Scooter. Scooter hits the nail on the head. My friend had complained that my regulation would make more government power. But as Scooter points out, my regulation would lead to less government homeowner association power. To illustrate the point about water, I was driving through Arkansas a few days ago on the way back to Texas. There were scattered thunderstorms. As I entered Texas, the clouds dispersed, and I could only imagine that God was unhappy with Rick Perry's Christian prayer meeting that excluded Jews and Muslims. In any event, outside of Dallas, I passed a grass farm at 4:30 in the afternoon, watering St. Augustine in the 110-degree heat and high wind. Only about a quarter of all the water released from the irrigation spreaders hit this high water using invasive non-native species. In Austin, we're not allowed to water in that manner. Can't water our lawns that way. I was driving across the country and I was listening to Alex Jones, and he really gets to the heart of the message. He believes that the killing of the 30 downed SEAL Team 6 members in Afghanistan and the bin Laden lynching were fakes. I separately questioned the bin Laden lynching due to the release of the documentary Killing Bin Laden 3 weeks after the release of the photograph. The documentary was totally self-serving to this administration and disclosed massive amounts of intelligence and intelligence gathering techniques. And it was released 3 weeks after the photo of Obama and Hillary watching the big screen, seeing Osama bin Laden being killed. If you've ever seen that photo, you will know what I'm talking about. And you have to see that documentary, Killing Bin Laden. Of course, Alex always goes a little bit too far, but he's got a point. I heard Neil Boortz he's on Fox, go through his litany of what the government should or should not do, including stopping all rulemaking at the federal level because there are too many rules already. Oh, Neil. If you've ever seen this guy on Fox or heard him, he just doesn't get to the heart of the problem. I have to ask you, Neil, what about the non-regulations, regulations that do not exist for fracking? Now, fracking is, and I've talked about it in the past, the idea that a company is trying to get natural gas that is dispersed among rocks. In order to do that, they pump high-pressure water and chemicals that they won't disclose because they're industry secrets into these things. Groundwater's been poisoned around these areas. It's not connected, just like Thank You for Smoking, that movie. Can't connect the two, but it turns out where there's wells, there's dirty water. Where there's wells, there's water that you can light on fire out of your faucet. Permanently. Fresh water, which we don't have enough of, for sure. So Neil does not want to regulate that. He just goes, regulations are bad. We must stop all regulations. I don't know what he considers himself. It's obviously a Republican because it is not a libertarian. He doesn't talk about how the rulemaking that exists or is being done today is being done by the industries that are regulated. I would say yes, let's stop all rulemaking that has been drafted by industry. Let's stop all rulemaking that is being handed out by industry to regulators that are going to get jobs. Let's stop all rulemaking that is being handed to senators and congressmen who are going to get jobs in those regulated industries when they get out. But Neil, we have to have rulemaking or the commons will be decimated. And I'll go on a bit later on some other issues. These global comments that come out of people that regulations are killing industry. Do you not do a cost-benefit analysis to determine what kind of health problems coal dust causes? Certainly when these guys make these global comments, you don't hear about that. All right. So from time to time, I get comments from non-commenter rantees, people that normally don't talk or send anything in. They're on my big list. It started off on the banned list, and it's turned into this rant list. Luckily, only a few people have wanted to get off of it. I received one after my rant last week, and I apologize to my friend A. I'm going to use her as an example, and I hope she doesn't hate me for it. It's not personal. I got it on Thursday. It was actually when I woke up Thursday morning, I saw this thing on my BlackBerry. Goldie. Oh my God, Goldie. I was reading and agreeing with you until you said you would vote for Obama. Goldie. He's attempting to make Congress irrelevant. I'll tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and read this first, and then I'm going to power through it real quick. Goldie, he's attempting to make Congress irrelevant. His policies will probably cause irreparable damage. The weight of the regulations, the huge increasing debt, the high tax rate for corporations, and the power of the EPA is killing business. This is a soft tyranny moving toward hard tyranny. The taxes and the debt are horrible. No oil drilling, canceling oil leases for no reason, crazy demonization of coal mining, Obamacare, demonizing business. So the Congress won't pass something he wants. Instead, he works around it, and his administration passes regulations to accomplish his goals. He continues to work around the Constitution. Too much power in government. The Founding Fathers knew human nature, and they purposely wrote the Constitution to protect from this kind of tyranny. I truly can choose my light bulb in my car all by myself. I don't need someone who thinks they're smarter than I am to tell me what light bulb to use or what car to drive. I would like to choose my own charity, and that is not the federal government. So they can pass my money out to every Tom, Dick, or Harry who's sitting on their asses not even looking for a job. I truly know people who are on unemployment who won't look for a job until their unemployment runs out, now 99 months later. I've been reading the classic series about George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, the books that don't lie about them, which are written including their own words and words from letters of people who lived at that time. They were honorable men with integrity, and we have strayed so far from the principles on which this country was founded, the experiment in freedom, the first government thoughtfully planned with the people as the foundation, not the elite. This same battle has been staged throughout human existence on earth. I pray that somehow we can get back to the basics, the foundation of the United States of America. I truly believe that the change Obama wants, but will not openly address, is socialism. His associates have even discussed re-education for those people who don't agree, including death to the people who can't be re-educated, according to a CIA plant in that association. Please find a less government candidate whom you can support. I love you, man. Regards, A. I responded, I'm glad you're reading the rant. Sorry so much is off script. I strongly urge you to watch a little Jon Stewart, Chris Matthews, or Rachel Maddow, since it seems you're stuck on Russian Hannity only. You must get input from the other side. It's your duty, as painful as it is. From a libertarian point of view, and agreeing with the tragedy of the commons, we must have regulation or the commons, air, land, and water, will be decimated. The question is not regulation or not. The question is effective regulation versus ineffective regulation. Are you saying you don't want any mileage requirements for cars? And are you saying that toxic materials can be placed inside light bulbs like when they first came out? Or are you just complaining about government dollars subsidizing this particular technology of electric cars and the new mandate for more efficient light bulbs? Thanks, Goldie. She replied back, if you break one of the new bulbs, you must evacuate your house and hazmat has to come clean it up. The light bulbs may be more efficient, but the ones that actually light a room are going to be very expensive. Who is benefiting from this new light bulb? GE, in Obama's back pocket. What about the wonderful electric cars? Who's benefiting? GE. Oh, and electricity will necessarily skyrocket. Not stuck on Russian Hannity, mainly reading the actual writings and speeches of Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and George Washington. By the way, Thomas Jefferson said we should have a revolution every 25 years. That's me. Back to her letter. Some regulation okay, but businesses and individuals are bearing the weight of an elephant on their backs every day. People being arrested for having front yard gardens, a fire chief being fired because he doesn't speak Spanish, and what about the fact that Al Gore is lying? The whole research is suspect. They're all making money selling a lie and using it to enslave the people. It's just not true. No, I'm not a pure libertarian. Yes, complaining about the subsidies, complaining about the government picking winners and losers, complaining about not enforcing the law, complaining about an executive branch that ignores Congress and writes executive orders when they don't agree with him, complaining about a president who ignores courts and finds another way to block oil drilling while giving money to Brazil to drill deeper in the Gulf of Mexico. Obamacare, sigh. I'm sure you have never tried to use the VA. I have children who have. The list goes on and on. Obama just keeps finding ways to stop business in America, and please don't get me started on the debt. We're at a crossroads in this country. The Obama path is not the one that works unless you're a friend of George Soros, which Obama is, who's betting on the failure of America. Goldie, darling, it's just getting too nuts out there. I believe in liberty, freedom, moral courage, divine providence, integrity, and honor. Less government, not policing the world, or nation building. This is a great nation with good, wholesome people, but if men were angels, no government would be necessary. Federalist Paper number 51, James Madison. Thanks for reading my rant. A. All right, let's power back through this thing. I hate to say it, A, but this is all out of Fox. Okay, everything you said, except a couple of things. The reason why I said I would vote for Obama was because I weighed what happened in 2000 between Gore and Bush. And what we ended up getting, bottom line, was a Supreme Court that is pro-corporation. They deem corporations to be people. That is not what the founders intended. The founders did not intend freedom of speech to mean that groups, corporations, unions could give as much as they wanted to politicians. That's what we got from a Republican president. Republican appointees that happen to be pro-corporation. Now, the odds are that a Democratic president would not have appointed those Supreme Court justices. That's the bottom line. That 70% of the economic problems that we have today are because corporations write the tax rules, write the regulations, give jobs and give unlimited funds. Goldie, he's attempting to make Congress irrelevant. Every president does that. His policies will probably cause irreparable damage. I don't see that. I mean, that's happened. George Bush, same thing. The weight of the regulations, the huge increasing debt. Okay, the weight of the regulations, the weight of bad regulations, yes. The huge increasing debt, we've talked about that. The high tax rate for corporations, no. I do not agree with that. Corporations are a way to shield individuals from liability. If you want to just go ahead and run a business under your individual name, you can pay whatever tax rate is out there individually, and you won't be taxed twice. Buy insurance. You want to have a corporation to shield you from liability? That's what you're going to have to pay for it. The power of the EPA is killing business. Soft tyranny moving toward hard tyranny. I don't know what that means. Taxes and the debt. No oil drilling. Canceling oil leases for no reason? Are you saying that the Gulf oil gusher was no reason? Crazy demonization of coal mining? Mountaintops being blown off with no liability for trash and crap going into the streams and no cleanup requirement? That was out of the Bush White House. Obamacare, we all agree that some universal health care is there. Right now, people go to emergency rooms. If we have a different way to take care of it, it'll be cheaper. Demonizing business? Nah. He continues to work around the Constitution. That I agree. I agree with that. Too much power in government. I agree with that. The Founding Fathers knew human nature, and they purposely wrote the Constitution to protect from this kind of tyranny. That's correct. Where were you during George Bush? Or during Bill Clinton? Or during George Bush the Sr.? Or during Ronald Reagan, when he deregulated the S&L industry and caused a $1 trillion collapse through no regulation? We know what human nature does. They operate by incentives and disincentives. I truly can choose my light bulb in my car all by myself. You can. Light bulbs used to have hazardous materials in them. Do you want to go back to that? You're just choosing this little tiny sliver of regulation that's bothering you. This little one. I can choose my car all by myself. Okay. Do you want it with no catalytic converter? Do you want a pre-Clean Air Act car? Will you pay for my lung cancer that I get, my emphysema, from your car? The fact is, we have these common costs that we all must incur. It will be cheaper in the health care that we have if we have more efficient cars, higher mileage cars. We will have less deaths in Iraq and Yemen and Somalia and Libya and Saudi Arabia. I don't need someone who thinks they're smarter than I am to tell me what light bulb to use or what car to drive. That's right out of Rush Limbaugh's and O'Reilly's mouth. The idea that there are these elites telling you what to do. I hate to say it, but you're not actually analyzing the issue correctly. You're spewing back the phrases. I would like to choose my own charity, and that's not the federal government. Okay. So they can pass money out to every Tom, Dick, or Harry who's sitting on their asses. Now, we have talked about there is the problem of the incentive and the disincentive. Too many entitlements leads people to not work. I agree. But people paid into those unemployment funds. I'm not saying we should continue them. I do agree, I've seen that as well. People on unemployment wait until their stuff runs out and then they get a job. I've been reading the classic series about George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, the books that don't lie about them. There's no such thing. They were honorable men with integrity. They had slaves. They were private property owners. Women didn't vote. If you didn't have property, you didn't vote. Or poll taxes. It was the first government thoughtfully planned with the people as the foundation, not the elite. It was protection of private property that they were looking to do. I pray that we can get back to the basics. Me too. We agree. I truly believe the change Obama wants but will not openly address is socialism. His associates have even discussed re-education for those people who don't agree, including death to the people who can't be re-educated, according to a CIA plant in that association. Hey, please, 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 please find a less government candidate whom you can support. Well, it's not going to be Rick Perry. She came back after I said some of this. If you break one of the new light bulbs, you must evacuate your house, and hazmat has to come clean it up. It's bullshit. Who is benefiting? GE in Obama's back pocket. True. GE was in Bush's back pocket. So was Exxon. And Exxon's in Obama's back pocket as well. And Pfizer. And Boeing. And Lockheed. And Halliburton. Not stuck on Russian Hannity. Yes, you are. Re-education? That's the Van Jones fear or something. What are you talking about? That makes no sense. Businesses and individuals are bearing the weight of an elephant on their backs every day. No, taxpayers are bearing the weight of an elephant every day. It's the structural regulatory defect of large corporations being able to give money to politicians. That's the defect. Small businesses and individuals bear the weight because they can't lobby. Corning doesn't pick up the phone when I call. What about the fact that Al Gore's lying? Whatever. They're all making money selling a lie and using it to enslave the people? That sounds like Alex Jones. It's just not true. No, I'm not a pure libertarian. Yes, complaining about the subsidies, complaining about the government picking winners and losers. That's what they do. We need to change the Constitution. Term limits. Limit donations. Individuals only. $100 a person, including the person that's running for office. I'm sure you've never tried to use the VA. No, but I have a very good friend who has. It's something. We're doing something for our veterans. If we had no VA, how would they get medical care? As bad as the VA is, my buddy has MS. Thank God he goes to the VA and gets his drugs there. Obama just keeps finding ways to stop business in America. Now think about this. Do you think he wants to be president next time? This is an obvious question. Do you think he really wants to be a one-term president? I mean, if he's really bent on destroying the country, if he really was, he wouldn't want to run again. He would be a one-termer on his own. Unless you're a friend of George Soros. So pick the Koch brothers, who's betting on the failure of America. People short the dollar all the time. That's betting against America. Short American corporation stocks. That's not really betting against America, by the way. That's betting against American corporations, which do not have loyalty to this country. All right, that's enough of that. Here's a story from the Austin American Statesman, and I apologize, I didn't mean to make it personal, but there's just so much message in that email. You need to go deeper to the deep structural problems that we have. Determine whether or not we can fix those structural problems. And if we cannot, then you need to learn and figure out how to level the playing field with those that have disproportionate power. I'm going to talk about that next week. Rush talked about that today. Economic justice and how the Democrats use that phrase. All right, here's a story from the Austin American Statesman dated July 24, 2011 regarding Perry and the EPA. Since everybody loves Perry and he may run, and he is not a libertarian. He is a corporate welfare guy. He helps his donors, quid pro quo. You give him money, he will help you. So he does. It's legal. That's how we got a new law, and if you buy a new home, you have to go through this commission in order to get structural defects fixed. You have to go through this organization. You have to post a bond. Bob Perry is one of his largest donors, Perry Homes. Took a lot of money from the home builders. And now it's really difficult to sue home builders for a defect in the home that you bought. Now that's more regulations. Why don't people complain about that? Why don't Republicans complain about that? He added regulations. We have laws. We have the DTPA. It's already there. He instituted a whole new set of regulations. But just think what is going to happen to the EPA if Perry gets elected. Just think. You think the Japanese nuclear disaster was bad? Perry environmental stance would transform EPA. As governor, Perry stresses cooperation with industry. By Asher Price, Austin American Statesman staff. As governor of Texas, Rick Perry has argued that the U.S. EPA has strangled business and interfered with state environmental efforts, and he has championed a half-dozen lawsuits challenging federal air pollution and greenhouse gas regulations. The dispute with the EPA serves as a proxy for larger Perry arguments about states' rights versus federal power, which is what he's running on. It illustrates how Washington's command and control environmental bureaucracy is destroying federalism and individuals' ability to make their own economic decisions. Perry wrote in his book, Fed Up. It's destroying federalism. Makes no sense. So should he run for the White House and win, how would a President Perry treat the EPA? From his rhetoric and record as governor, one might think that he'd be tempted to dissolve the agency. Yes. He has actively loosened regulations in the name of economic development and denied that scientific consensus exists on climate change, ascribing anxieties about greenhouse gases to a secular carbon cult. Secular. That means don't believe in God. But on the campaign trail, he is likely to tell a story about environmental accomplishment. He will point to improvements in air quality in the state's major cities, and he will note that the state leads the nation in wind power. And he will say that Texas has done it by working with industry, not being its adversary. If the EPA thinks a sweeping mandate is required to spur the creation and adoption of alternative energy sources, they need to know the private sector is already making that happen here in Texas, helped by incentives from the state, he said in a news conference after Obama's victory in 2008. Now that's true. The incentives from the state are, we will not stop you from polluting. That is how it is here in Texas. They were fighting, because the TCEQ would do nothing to comply with the Clean Air Act. Nothing. That's why the EPA had to step in 2 years ago, because nothing was being done. The state's wind, back to the article, the state's wind industry won its greatest boost from a 1999 mandate by the legislature that Texas utilities buy a certain amount of power from renewable sources as part of a grand bargain to deregulate the state's electricity market. In other words, wind power got a foothold because of just the sort of big government edict that Perry abhors. To his credit, he encouraged a $5 billion ongoing plan to build transmission lines from West Texas and panhandle wind farms to state's population centers, said Tom Smitty Smith, the head of the Austin Office of Public Citizen, government watchdog group. The lines will be paid for by the utilities, which will pass costs on to ratepayers. I'm actually a green ratepayer. Perry also could repeat a claim about improvements to the state's air quality. Between 2000 and 2010, he noted in a news release last year and in a letter to President Obama, the Texas Clean Air Program has achieved a 22% reduction in ozone and a 46% decrease in nitrogen oxide emissions. PolitiFact Texas rated that statement as half true. UT chemical engineering professor David Allen told the Statesman that it's difficult to say quantitatively whether federal or state regulations were primarily responsible for the emission reductions. A quarter of the state's nitrogen oxide pollution comes from industrial sources, which are mainly what the state regulates, but much of the rest comes from cars and other mobile sources, which the federal government regulates. The point of Perry's statement in any case was to say to the federal government, hands off, we can handle environmental issues ourselves. Yes, we can, and we get paid. It isn't necessary to bludgeon job creators with hefty fines and penalties in order to make progress, he writes in Fed Up. It is better to work with businesses and harness American innovation, the same innovation that drives our economic success in the realm of pollution control. If you take their money, you don't cite them for polluting. That's what he means. One example, in the mid-1990s, Texas opted to issue so-called flexible permits that set facility-wide emission limits. The permits, strongly defended by Perry, set overall emission caps for facilities rather than particular limits on emissions from a single boiler. The flexible permit program is like saying, as long as you go 55 miles per hour on average in a month, you can go 100 or 125 some days. Neil Carman, air quality specialist at the Lone Star chapter of the Sierra Club, once told the Austin American Statesman. It allows excessive kinds of pollution if you play that game. Federal regulators say the permits leave them in the dark about how many gases particular parts of a plant are belching into the air, and they're demanding an overhaul to the permitting program. The upshot has been hot rhetoric over the past 2 years between Perry and EPA officials. The EPA now appears to have the upper hand as some refiners, utilities, and manufacturers have been working with federal authorities to revamp their permits. According to several measures tracked by the Environmental Defense Fund, Texas is the nation's leading polluter. Its national rank among emitters of sulfur dioxide, which contributes to acid rain and smog, actually rose during Perry's tenure from 5th in 2000 to 3rd in 2009. That's coal. But the state's pollution might be as much a reflection of the richness of Texas's industrial base as a comment on environmental compliance. Perry approaches the issues from a very libertarian bent, said Jim DiPizzo, policy director of Republicans for Environmental Protection. Republicans for Environmental Protection. The EPA would be in for some significant budget reduction. There would be no new initiatives, no regulatory programs that would be initiated. There would be litigation from environmental groups that believe he's not enforcing the Clean Air Act and Water Act as robustly as the law provides. Any regulatory programs would be really throttled back, he said. He has shown no interest in climate policy at all. He doesn't accept the science. All right. He talks about that he's a libertarian, but I think we've talked about kind of what it is to be a libertarian. A libertarian starts with no regulations. None. No property rights. No property boundaries. No nothing. Everybody's running around. There's no laws. So we need laws to say, this is your property, this is your property, this is your property. We need laws to say that you can't take a shovel the crap from your outhouse over my fence. We need laws that say that you can't pollute on your property if it affects my drinking water. So within 10 seconds, we have determined that a purely libertarian view of no regulations is impossible. That's not what America is. It's not possible to have. You need effective regulation. Now, the structural regulatory defect that I talk about over and over and over again is that the people that are regulated write the regulations. Because politicians don't have term limits, they can take as much money as they want from the regulated. The regulated draft the regulations. They do wink, wink, nod, nod, give jobs to the regulators and the congressmen and the senators and the vice presidents, Dick Cheney, and they get the regulations they want. If you're a libertarian, you should be complaining about that. Because the single step from no laws at all to effective laws does not occur because of the Supreme Court in the United States saying that corporations are people entitled to free speech rights in the form of unlimited political contributions. Perry takes money from everyone and has, legally. That's the system that's set up in Texas. You can donate as much as you want as an individual. You can't do that on the federal level. You can take it from corporations, groups, and unions. Do you think, now all you're hearing about is the Perry miracle, the Texas miracle. Do you think that if Perry becomes the president, that he's going to work on changing the structural regulatory defect that leads to the tragedy of the Commons, that leads to me subsidizing Exxon shareholders because they don't have to clean up their fracking mess, Neil Boards? That leads to me having to clean up the messes in the Gulf of Mexico as a taxpayer so that the shareholders of BP can benefit? No. The Commons will be decimated. You think that by lifting regulations or eliminating regulations, it is going to inspire the industry to hire more people? They may, but our healthcare costs will skyrocket. There will be more pollution. They will push more of their costs on to us. They will privatize the profits that they make. They will get cheaper oil leases. They will get cheaper coal mining leases. They will get regulations that will cost them less to pollute. Shareholders will benefit. Shareholders in any country. So if you own 100 shares of Exxon, it goes from $40 to $50, you make $1,000. How much does your lung transplant cost? And if they get rid of Obamacare or Medicare, how are you going to get therapy? It's going to cost a lot more than $1,000. Republicans, you must start looking at the actual problem. I'm not saying Obama's the solution at all, but I know Rick Perry's worse. Promise. As to that part. All right, an excellent article was in the Austin American-Statesman entitled "Central Texas Toll Roads Need More State Subsidies Than Expected." How coincidental that I would have commented on this subject on July 20th, 2011, regarding the financial problems that the constructor-operator was already having at some other toll roads not located in Texas. And this is the constructor-operator of Highway 130, which goes past the F1 in Austin. This is by Ben Ware and the Austin American-Statesman staff, July 18th. Tolls and other revenue have fallen more than $100 million short of covering debt and operating costs of the state's three-road Central Texas Turnpike system since the highways opened about 4 years ago. So they mean 45, 130, and North Mopac. Texas Department of Transportation subsidizes almost 70% more, Texas Department of Transportation subsidies almost 70% more than originally predicted have made up the difference. So that means the taxpayers are making up the difference for these private toll roads. Those subsidies, covered primarily by state gasoline taxes that otherwise would be available for other road spending, are other roads that are not toll roads, should average about $38 million a year over the next decade and total about $750 million by 2042, according to TxDOT documents. The system's first profitable year is not estimated to occur until 2030, with some years in the red even after that because of major road rehabilitation expenses. These tollways were Perry's babies, giveaways to donors. Toll revenue from the three roads, Texas 130, Loop 1, and Texas 45 North, after exceeding expectations in the system's initial years, has fallen about 6% below projections since September. I wonder if it's because gas prices are up. A trend that could make those future subsidies even higher. TxDOT officials, in explaining the shortfall, point to the recession and its dampening effects on both travel and development near the tollways. Revenue for the system comes mainly from tolls, but fines and investment income on reserves also provide some revenue. The Texas Transportation Commission has not raised the system's initial toll rates, which, at about 12 cents a mile, are less than a third of what the Central Texas Regional Mobility Authority charges drivers on the 183A tollway in Cedar Park. Yeah. At least one member of the Texas Transportation Commission, which governs TxDOT, said it's time for the agency to consider ceasing management of toll roads, instead leasing out even existing state toll roads to the private sector. Any dollar that we support that system with is a dollar that's taken out of the state of Texas to build and support other roads, said Commissioner Ted Houghton of El Paso, who served on the commission since 2003 and has long advocated such agreements with toll road companies. We need to get out of that business. Find someone who knows how to market those roads, to operate them and collect the tolls. We do as a sort of side business. Aside from the Austin roads, TxDOT runs toll roads in Tyler and Laredo. Local toll authorities are in charge of about a dozen other Texas toll roads. TxDOT staff officials downplayed any gloomy implications of the recent revenue and spending numbers, arguing that ongoing efforts to cut operating and maintenance costs, as well as prospects for greater traffic in the 66-mile system, will steadily improve the situation. Moving forward, I think that the economy is picking up. You know, we would not have built these things if they had not said they were going to be profitable. Moving forward, I think that the economy is picking up, and I see development such as the Formula One track and ancillary development around that track helping that, said Mark Tomlinson, TxDOT's Turnpike Director. The F1 track, expected to open next June, will be about a mile east of where Texas 130 crosses FM 812 southeast of Austin. Several large residential and mixed-use projects are also planned for the Texas 130 corridor, but they won't be complete for 10 to 20 years. Let me digress for a moment on the F1 track and the Texas subsidy to the owner of the track, totaling $25 million. This is a giveaway, government spending to a private individual to bring this track to Austin. So this kind of government spending is okay, but spending $25 million on teachers is not? Don't say you're a libertarian. Don't say you're for small government, Perry, and Republicans who support Perry, because you're not. You're small government except for when you benefit from the giveaway. Don't act like you have a moral higher ground that you're on. You're not. You're just choosing a different welfare recipient. And it happens to be a rich individual who donates, not poor individuals who need food on the table. I'm not saying to give the money to the poor people. I'm just saying don't say that you are for smaller government if you support Rick Perry. Don't say it, because it's not true. It makes you look like an idiot. All right, back to the article. Beyond that, Tomlinson said, the 2012 opening of the southern 40 miles of Texas 130 connecting the Austin area to Interstate 10 east of San Antonio is likely to boost traffic and revenue. A private consortium headed by a Spanish toll road company is footing the $1.2 billion bill to construct that extension under a long-term lease with TxDOT. The picture's going to be pretty good for the future, Tomlinson said. I'll bet, because he's going to go to work for them afterwards, I'm sure. The Turnpike system was TxDOT's first foray in decades into the pay-to-drive world. The agency in 2002 borrowed $2.2 billion on the bond market, and with an additional $500 million of its tax funds and a like amount of local tax money, built the tollways in Austin's northern and eastern suburbs. So instead of using tax money, which would never have happened, they used bonds. And bonds are the demise of this country, locally. Because there is no way that taxpayers would have agreed to that. When they put it on the ballot that we're going to sell these bonds, people just don't understand what it is. I've called for in the past, and my Tea Party friend have called for in the past, actually showing how much your taxes will go up paying back these bonds. It's killing us, and it is a giveaway. These are donors. Do you remember the story related a few months ago regarding TxDOT, Texas Road Building Agency, complaining that with gas prices rising, revenues from gas taxes were falling? Well, just take a look how in this article they were actually pushing the controversial F1 track as a method of making sure the tollway that was previously built is profitable. See how it connects? And a few weeks back, I was talking about how there was a structural defect in bonding being used for the funding of government project which allows politicians to say that this project won't raise taxes, which is bullshit, and that projects that would not otherwise be built get built. Remember the example of Southwest Parkway that was pushed through by Barnes Connolly to get cars to their subdivision by using a road district, paid back by additional taxes to the landowners that fronted Southwest Parkway? The taxes never materialized. The bonds defaulted, and Travis County bought the road, since they were using other people's money. My point there, and my point here, and my point with all of this is that taxpayers are bamboozled into saying yes to bonds because no taxpayer dollars are going to be used. Then inevitably, taxpayer dollars are used to buy the tollway back, which is what is going to happen to Highway 130. We will own a road that we never wanted in a place that we never wanted it to be with money that we do not have and will never be able to pay for, with donors making tons of taxpayer dollars, corporate welfare. I was listening to Fox Radio today, and a commentator, I couldn't remember who it was, I don't know who it was talking about the list of things that he wants done, one of which was the repatriation of corporate profits. Apparently all these corporations hold profits overseas, Bermuda, Switzerland, and in order to bring them back, they would have to pay a tax on them. This is by Jim Hightower in the Austin American-Statesman. It was July 15th, 2011. It's entitled, Not So Little Corporate Piggies. They're back. Citigroup, Coca-Cola, IBM, Merck & Company, and dozens of other major U.S. corporations are back in Washington, like hogs at the trough, demanding to be fed another tax boondoggle. This is not the first pig out for these oinkers. In 2005, having stashed huge profits in foreign countries and tax havens, the multinational giants came to Washington offering Congress a heck of a deal. We'll bring this money back to the U.S. and invest it here, creating beaucoup jobs. And if you give us a sweetheart tax rate on our profits of only about 5% rather than the usual 35% rate. The Bushites and GOP Congress enthusiastically took the bait. That's acting like they didn't know what the bait was for, that there was a hook there. Sure enough, $312 billion came home, but instead of investing it in job creation, top executives and big shareholders simply put it in their pockets. 60% of the boondoggle was gobbled up by only 15 of America's biggest multinationals. 60% went to 15 of the largest multinationals, many of which actually shut down American plants, fired thousands of workers, and moved more of their production abroad. Merck, for example, brought nearly $16 billion home in October 2005, then announced a restructuring plan the next month to close U.S. plants and cut some 3,500 jobs. You can almost hear the executives chortle and say, thanks, suckers. Well, look out. For a corporate lobbying front is working with Republican House leaders to sucker us again. The group, including such super-rich computer giants as Apple, Dell, Google, and Intel, is pushing for what they call a repatriation holiday. With a big stage wink, they promise to create jobs in exchange for that same dandy 5% tax deal. What gross hoggishness. State and national budgets are being slashed, and these fat greedheads are trying to scam America with a tax holiday for themselves. To fight their greed, go to www.usuncut.org. Now, tell me why someone on Fox would want to support this, since we would not collect any revenue, or minuscule revenue, from allowing them to do it. And corporations are holding trillions of uninvested dollars already. Obviously, Fox is pandering to the corporations' wants and desires, as well as pandering to those that hold a lot of shares in those corporations. You're not a news organization, you are a lackey. Why would you want that to happen? What is good for these corporations is not specifically good for America like it was in the old days. It's corporate imperialism, not American imperialism. If these people want to bring these dollars back, or whatever they're held in, euros, then let them bring them back. The U.S. is the safest country in the world. What do you want to do, hold Chinese currency? Euros? They do not need the tax holiday. Do not allow this to happen. This idea of holding up these funds is keeping American corporations from creating jobs is bullshit. And when you hear a commentator talk about it, you know who they represent. That's all there is today. I want to thank our sponsors, all of which support this form of conversation, but not necessarily the content of this conversation. PianoByAngelo.com, Angelo Limbesi's, who teaches and plays keyboards all over Austin. ZetaDesign.com for all of your decorative painting needs. You can make anything look like anything, like marble. Wood can look like marble. AustinAreaPlumbing.com for all of your Austin plumbing problems. TicoAdventureLodge.com, a small hotel in Samara, Costa Rica. CNC Surf School in Samara. It's www.cncsurfsamara.webs.com. La Vela Latina, a great sunset bar and restaurant in Samara with a great red sunset chair that I love to sit in. Ambar Tequila at www.santospirits.com, an extremely smooth tequila. Another cool 4-unit green hotel in Samara called The Logan at www.thelogansamara.com. And of course, the Delicate Genius in Houston, who is a platinum sponsor. And by the way, she has promised me that even though I calculated there was no way to pay back this debt, she promised me she would tell me how the debt can be paid back. I know she's not including all the personal guarantees signed by the United States government for all the interbank loans. But anyway, I can't wait to hear that. Delicate Genius. Thanks for coming out.